Hello and welcome to Behind the Grind. I'm Matt Donnelly, and on today's show, our guest needs no introduction, but he's going to get one anyway. He's an NFL insider and NFL draft analyst there for ESPN. He's also known for having Kiwis at the bottom of his fruit scouting records there. He's a Missouri Southern State University's very own Matt Miller. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing well, man. Definitely the best intro I've had in a long time.
Well, we got to get the Kiwis in there. I mean, that kind of gives it a little bit of authenticity, don't you think?
Right? Absolutely. Yeah. For people who don't know, kiwi's the worst fruit ever. So,
we're going to get on this a little bit. We're going to get on this a little bit later because I have a blind ranking fruit style here a little bit later on in the show. So, perfect. I know you're used to ranking draft prospects, but we're going to rank some fruit. And I'm not going to tell you which ones we got, but I mean, Twitter kind of gave us a little bit of an insight on this a few weeks back. So, we're going to touch on that here. But first, the question that we ask every show right off the beginning, if you were coming in to close out at the bottom of the ninth for the Kansas City Royals, maybe in the wild card game there against the Athletics way back when, but say you've got the ball, you're taking the mound, what is that intro music going to be?
I know that this is cliche, but it has to be Enter Sandman by Metallica. Like, I get it. Like, it's, Mariano did it and made it iconic, but that's the song. That's the one. And I think of a bucket list item for me is to be at Virginia Tech for a night game for that moment of hearing Enter Sandman. So growing up I grew up in the 90s, but someone who was born in the 80s, I have two older brothers. I very much was, indoctrinated into the hair metal era. So I will stay very true to my bloodlines and go with Enter Sandman.
Some of us have to hold on to that hair metal just a little bit longer, if you know what I'm saying. So
I'm right there with you, man. Yeah.
I think I saw on Twitter, they talk about the most iconic college sports moments. There's the Army-Navy game, Sweet Home Alabama for Alabama. Enter Sandman at Virginia Tech. That has to be at the top of the list, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And so I've been so fortunate over the last, 13 years of being able to be at a lot of really cool stadiums to see a lot of cool moments. Like Sweet Home Alabama, Neck at LSU. I'm a Texas Longhorn fan, so to be there and to hear the Texas Fight chant with 110,000 people, have been to the Big House, have been to the Shoe, but it's like the top of my list would be Army Navy. My dad was in the Army, so that's up there for me. And then again, it's Virginia Tech at night specifically. I think a Penn State whiteout game would be on there as well. Like if inadvertently ranking my college football bucket list items here, but those three are the ones where before too long I got to make those happen.
So I kind of heard you say Texas Longhorn fan. How's a Missouri native become a Texas Longhorn fan? Because you got the Chiefs, you've got your Kansas City Royals, you've got a couple teams there in Missouri you could be rooting for, but you kind of went to Texas there. What's the story?
Yeah, so honestly, I grew up a San Francisco 49ers fan and a Texas Longhorns fan. And the reason was, so my parents didn't pass down sports fandom to my brothers and I. We very much came about this our own way. So it wasn't like my son has grown up watching sports. He has adopted a lot of my teams. I didn't have that. So for me, we would come home from church on Sundays, turn the TV on, and, we're talking early 90s. The 49ers were always on. And I just fell in love with Jerry Rice. I fell in love with Joe Montana and Steve Young. And it was the same on Saturdays for us with Texas because the University of Missouri in the early 90s was not on television for us, at all. And I actually live closer to the University of Arkansas than I do the University of Missouri. So, we didn't come home and watch this was way before Brad Smith, way before Chase Daniel. Mizzou had no one in the early 90s. So, but what we got was Ricky Williams. And then we got Major Applewhite. And being an undersized kid myself growing up, I watched Major Applewhite be, 5'11", this, complete afterthought who is being replaced by a legend in Chris Sims. Yet Major is coming in and closing out games. And so I absolutely fell in love with that kind of underdog story of that team and just got hooked on it and have been, probably ever since I was, 10 years old watching Texas play back in the old Southwest Conference or definitely, I think they were in the Big Eight right after that.
I kind of caught a little bit there about the underdog kind of story, maybe a little undersized, Major Applewhite. I know for myself growing up, I was a little undersized as well until eventually I turned into Mr. Potato Head and I started growing in other directions. But did you play sports as a kid, and how did those sports kind of develop you to be the person you are today?
Yeah, so I'm from a very, very small town. It was like under 700 people when I was there. So growing up, we did not have rec league football until the sixth grade. So growing up, like I played basketball a little bit. I was in like karate actually more than I was in team sports. And then in the sixth grade, I started playing, like I played flag football for the first time in the sixth grade. And it was something that I had always wanted to do, but it just wasn't an option for us in such a small town. So from sixth grade on, I played football. I ran track, but it was one of those things where it was, it was hard at times for us to even have 22 guys going out for football in the entire high school. So, for me, sports was always a passion of something I like to read about, I like to learn about, I like to watch. Playing sports, just wasn't a lucrative thing at a 1A high school in Missouri where you've got, you're struggling to get 22 guys out so you can go 11 versus 11 on practice. There were a lot of times we would go half line in practice, because we couldn't get a full 11 on 11 going to where it was actually kind of equitable, especially between a freshman and a senior. We might have 8 kids from each grade in on the team. So that made it tough to do. So, where like the area I'm from now has certainly grown, and there's some high school football powerhouses, but they're not the school that I went to where, basketball and baseball were certainly more the focus than football was.
Well, let's talk about some of those maybe memories that you've had about playing sports or maybe from watching sports, because it hasn't always been great being a Missouri native, a Kansas City fan. The Chiefs weren't always great. The Kansas City Royals weren't always winning World Series titles, which they did.
Right.
And that's one thing we've got something in common. I'm a Raiders fan, so we have Bo Jackson, and I'm also a Montreal Expos fan. So I've been a fan free agent for the last, 20 years already. So let's talk about some of those memories. What are some of the more memorable moments that you remember from maybe the Royals, the Chiefs, something like that?
Yeah, man. So for me, I would always say the most memorable game for me ever was the '93 NFC Championship game. It was San Francisco against Dallas, and it was billed as this: whomever wins this is the actual Super Bowl. It's like no one cares who plays the Chargers the next week. So that's the one that I remember probably being the most rabid about as a youngster. I was 10 when that happened. You referenced it earlier. The 2014 Kansas City Royals season, to play the A's in a wild card, one night only, win and you're in, lose and your season's over. That game goes to extra innings. My younger brother and I are sitting on the third baseline when that ball gets hit down the third baseline, and they win that game, I think in the 14th or 15th inning. Then to have that run, we were at Game 7 when the Giants beat the Royals, when Madison Bumgarner comes out of the bullpen and beats your team. It's hard to be pissed at that. You're just kind of happy to be there in that moment after watching a team be bad for the first 30 years of your life. And then to follow it up in 2015, my least favorite baseball team ever will always be the New York Mets. So to have the Royals beat the Mets in the series, to have them do it in New York, to do it against that famed lineup, with Matt Harvey and all those guys, to beat the Mets in New York. Only thing that would have been sweeter would have been for it to happen in KC. But that's certainly one of those nights where like my brothers and I are all texting each other, living in different places as that game's happening. Was pretty sweet. So outside, like there've been professional moments that are certainly up there, but like as a fan, those are the ones that stand out.
There's always a poetic justice with that small market team takes on the big market team in the big market. And I think that's why everyone you don't have people hating on the Kansas City Royals. I don't know anyone who hates the Royals. You know what I mean? I don't know anyone who really hates the athletics other than maybe the municipality itself. But that's for another day altogether.
A's fans. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So we've both kind of grown up in a form of the CFL. I got the Canadian Football League. I'm a Saskatchewan Roughriders fan. You kind of had the CMFL going way back to the Joplin Crusaders. Let's talk about that experience and how that kind of helped develop you for your role with ESPN some 15 years later.
Yeah, it started. I was doing some scouting for the Arena League, particularly at this time for the Arena 2, which was like a feeder league for the Arena League. So it was a team called the Indiana Firebirds. Their GM had hired me to kind of scour the Southern Midwest for players. They were paying me like $50 a scouting report or something. It probably wasn't that much. They were paying me per scouting report of like a player that would be on their radar. So I went to this game in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and watched It was the Central Football League, and watched this semi-pro game, which was a lot of guys who were right out of college. So it was prime arena league ages, 22 to 25. Of course, you would get some like guys in their 30s who were hanging on, but there's a lot of like former college athletes who just weren't ready to give it up. And so I scouted this arena game, or the CFL game, excuse me, and talked to the coach after, because I was trying to get some information about a linebacker. And the coach was like, man, like what? I was 22 at the time. He's like, what are you doing? I was like, well, I scout for the Arena League. I'm here on behalf of the Indiana Firebirds. We're looking for players. And he and I just kind of like hit it off. And he was like, well, what do you do the rest of the time? And I was like, man, I work in marketing, actually. Like, I'm a marketing person for for this big company. And he calls me like 3 months later, and he's like, I just applied for a job in your hometown as a head football coach. Could you give me a reference? I was like, yeah, of course, would be happy to. And from there, it gave me my first opportunity to coach, because I coached for 3 years with Coach David Pitts was his name. We coached high school ball together. We coached semi-pro ball together. We were much better at coaching semi-pro. We won 2 championships doing that. I think we probably won like 7 games over 2 years coaching high school ball. But that it certainly helped. Once Bleacher Report came around in 2010, it was good because I had experience doing a lot of different things. I don't want to jump ahead too much, but like I had experience scouting and recruiting. I had experience coaching, even at a really small level, and I had some experience running my own website. Being a kind of a one man editorial team in a lot of ways. So it's one of those weird moments that I can look back on now. To look back 17 years ago, and be like, man, all those little weird things that I was doing that just felt like hobbies or felt like me ready to give up on a dream ended up really laying the foundation for what would come.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more, because I'm a guy who's been that independent editor, and I hate my only writer that I have, let's be honest. But let's talk about maybe a decision maybe that changed the trajectory of your life, right? You kind of talk about going into this coaching, maybe into the Bleacher Report and that preparation, but what was that one decision that maybe changed the whole path?
Yeah, so in 2008, I was actually out of high school. I went to college to be an EMT and a paramedic, and so I was actually working in a hospital for a couple of years, and I was just burnt out. I didn't really like it. It wasn't what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I spent a lot of time thinking about what I would like to do, which was write about football. So in 2008, I left the hospital setting. I got a job in marketing, which was what I was going to school for at the time, and just decided, okay, I have this job in marketing. I'm working like normal people hours now, not overnights in a hospital. I'm going to make another go at writing about football. And I decided to launch a website called New Era Scouting. And I had been like super active on message boards and forums from the time I was 16, and up until this point, and had a good network of people who, like that I could talk to about things, but also a small audience of people who would read my work. I'm talking like 1,000 people, not a lot of people at all. But in 2008, I decided to launch New Era Scouting, and that was to myself. It was like, okay, you're 20. I guess I was 22 or 23 years old. It was like, you're gonna try this one more time, and if it doesn't work, it's kind of your sign. It's time to move on and try something different. It's just like that. The beauty of being young and not having a lot of responsibility yet, to like where you're so naive that you're like, yeah, I could do this. Like I didn't go to journalism school. Like I live in a, town of a couple thousand people in the middle of nowhere, but I'm going to make this go. And, in 2008, I was like, all right, I'm going to buckle down and make a go at this. And it built and had like a really cool cult following of people. So that in 2010, I went to Bleacher Report. I was able to bring an audience with me. And I think that impressed the guys at Bleacher Report to say, hey, this dude's he's bringing some readers to us. And it really, I think it built a lot of trust between me and guys like Dave Finocchio, who founded Bleacher Report, and Dylan McNamara, who was my first editor, for them to see that I, was somebody who was as hungry as they were. At the time, we were all about the same age. And for them to see that, okay, like I've been doing this for 2 years on my own. I was my assignment editor. I was my editor. I was a copywriter. I was dabbling in podcasting, radio at that time, which not a lot of people were doing in 2008 and 2009. So I think when ultimately, when I heard about Bleacher Report and applied for a job there, it was one of those things where I was able to say, here's what I'm bringing with me. I'm not just somebody, cold calling, looking for an opportunity. I had started to make my own opportunities a little bit to that point.
So 2008, we're in 2024. I'm not a math expert, but that's about 16 years of experience that we're kind of drawing from. So let's kind of talk about some of the biggest changes that you've seen from 2008 to right now.
Oh my gosh, the amount of people that cover the draft is a big one. I mean, when I fell in love with the draft, it was Mel Kiper Jr. That was it. And you would read like Sports Illustrated and the Sporting News in March and April, and other people like Peter King would cover the draft, and Don Banks would cover the draft, and Chris Mortensen, and Ed Warder, people like that would cover the draft. But it wasn't like a year-round thing. That was just like Kiper was the dude year-round. And now, how many people cover the draft year-round? I mean, there's not only is there Mel, but there's people like Daniel Jeremiah, Bucky Brooks, Jordan Reed, Field Yates, myself. Pro Football Focus has a great group of people who do it. There's such a huge network. Even my first NFL Combine was 2012. It felt like there were 100 people covering the Combine. You go to the thing now, and there's thousands of credentialed media members who are there now. So just the sheer number of people who cover the draft is the biggest change. And the fact that, and I can remember having this conversation really early on at Bleacher Report of like, guys, the draft is year round now. Like it truly is a 365 sport. And that has come to fruition, thanks to people at the NFL Network, ESPN, to the NFL in general. Like the draft is now a 365 sport. It's a standalone thing. When my last year at Bleacher Report, they would give us breakdowns of the app, the Bleacher Report app. You could follow a sport. The number one most followed sport in the Bleacher Report app in 2021 was the NFL. The number two most followed sport in the Bleacher Report app was the NFL draft. And then it was the NBA, and then it was college football. So like to see that change from 2008 until now, to just how many people are diehard about the NFL draft, to have just been in Detroit a couple months ago and seen like 800,000 people show up to watch some names get read in person is wild to see that happen. And, my first draft I covered was 2012, and it was at Radio City Music Hall. And it still felt like kind of like we're all in a conference room watching this happen. And now it's this, it's like a music festival on steroids, basically, is the environment that it is now.
It's funny that grown-ass adults have a fixation for hearing people's names get called, watching dudes run around in their underwear. But I also know that your wife has a fixation for maybe Whole Foods. Well, you kind of pull towards rodeo, I heard, somewhere along the line.
You saw this, huh? I got called out. Yeah. I'm a guy from Southwest Missouri, man. I was just at a rodeo a week ago. My brothers and I, we're the first generation of millers since the 1680s to not be farmers. That's a true story. Like when the family came over from Germany in the 1680s, until my dad, who decided that, he wanted something a little bit different. I think he moved off the farm when he was in his mid-20s, mid-30s, when I was 2. So my brothers and I are the first millers. You trace that all the way back to not be farmers. So there's a lot of that still in the bloodlines, of like, I've probably got like 15 pair of cowboy boots and stuff that you don't see on TV, right? But it's very much, it's in there. Like I went on a 2-hour trail ride on a horse just last week, and the stuff I grew up doing that of course you're not going to talk about that on TV. It doesn't come up, but it's certainly very much a part of who I am, and I do appreciate you asking that, because a lot of people don't know that, that you're from a very, very small town in Missouri. My dad grew up on a cattle farm. It's very, very much a part of who I am.
And see, I can relate to that because I grew up in a small town, no traffic lights. I think we had one stop sign. 300 people was kind of the max that we had. And we basically grew up on the bucking barrel. I don't know if people are familiar with the old bucking barrel, where you put a barrel, tie some ropes, and you kind of start pulling on that thing, and it gives you that kind of bucking experience. So I totally feel that one there altogether. But I want to kind of pivot here to something that's also important to you. I know one of the things that you've done here is the importance of giving back, whether it's Coats for Kids or I've seen a bunch of things there on the social media there about raising money by donating signed memorabilia and stuff. So do you got anything like that kind of going on right now that people should know about?
Actually, we're hosting golf tournament Saturday. You and I are talking Tuesday night, so Saturday we're hosting a golf tournament. My parents have always been big on giving back. I grew up once a month they would volunteer at a homeless shelter, and kind of tell their story, of some of the things that they overcame. And then, but my brother and I were there, in lockstep with them, kind of watching that example. And in fact, the golf tournament that we do will benefit my parents' foundation. It's called the 15%, which is the statistic for food insecurity in the Southwest Missouri area. So they're very, very focused on that. They for years ran a free kitchen out of their home, 3 meals a week. They were feeding folks for free, no questions asked. They were raising money, getting food donated. I was helping raise money for it. And we were at one point, I was helping them. We were delivering meals to over 100 people 3 times a week for free, just, out of the goodness of their hearts. So something that's always going to be important to me is that mindset of whether you have a platform or you are able to, financially give, or you give with your time, whatever that might be. It's something that was very much instilled in me, growing up. And it is something that I always try to keep in mind.
All right. Well, keeping in mind food here, we're going to go to our blind rankings fruit edition here. And I'm going to give you 5 fruits. You got to put them in a spot there, and you can't go back. Like if I give you one, you can't just put them back there. So we're going to start this off with a nice, simple one here. We're going to go with watermelon, 1 through 5. Where does watermelon fall?
I'm going to go 4. I'm not a big watermelon guy. It's too messy.
See, the big difference here is seeds versus seedless too, I think. I mean, you got to take that into a factor here too, because if it has seeds, it's got to kind of go further back in the rankings, but that's neither here nor there. Now, what about cantaloupe? Because let's go cantaloupe, no salt, because I've seen someone come across here putting salt on the cantaloupe.
That's me. I do that. Yeah, my grandma did that. I'll go 3 with cantaloupe. I really enjoy cantaloupe. Like you get like a fruit cup, like for here, like we have Panera Bread. Like you'll get a sandwich and a fruit cup. And my son always I have to give him the pineapple, and I take the cantaloupe. So I'm a cantaloupe fan. Salt or unsalt, doesn't matter.
Yeah, I can't do the pineapple either. But speaking of pineapples, that comes up on the next one. So we've got cantaloupe at 3, watermelon at 4. Where does pineapple fall?
I'm going to go 2 because I'm afraid that you're going to have a great one that I'm holding out. But I'm a pineapple fan. You just can't eat too much. You get like the raw mouth effect. I don't know. I think that I read that's an allergy though. Like that doesn't happen to everybody, but it absolutely happens to me. But I definitely like pineapple.
Well, my kids, I'm not even sure they're my kids. They still like their pineapple on the pizza. Nothing ever happens to their mouth. So apparently that's the thing. And dude, that's wrong. Pineapple should not be on pizza.
We got home from vacation Saturday night. We're all wiped. Sunday, my wife is like, listen, let's not cook. Like we've been on the road for 10 days. This is like, let's just have a chill night. She's like, I'm going to order a pizza. Do you want some? I was like, yeah, absolutely. Cheese and pineapple. That's what she ordered. So I was like, no, I like pineapple standalone. I actually don't like it on pizza that much. So I think that was her way of getting the entire pizza to herself.
That's actually pretty smart planning on her part. That's what she was going for the whole time. So we got pineapple at 2, cantaloupe at 3, watermelon at 4. What about grapefruit?
Oh shoot! I gotta go 5. I don't like grapefruit at all. Like I'm weird about it. Yeah, not a grapefruit fan. I know it's like healthy breakfast. I can't pull myself to do it.
My grandma tried to get me eating grapefruit because it's a healthy breakfast, and I'd go into the shredder drawer and grab the sugar and sprinkle that.
Yeah, right. Makes it pointless, right?
Oh, yeah, it was perfect. It was the only way I could take it down there. So we've got an interesting one here because the next one on the list is figs. And that's got to be your number 1 fruit.
Oh, man.
It's a fruit. I Googled it. It has to be a fruit.
It's terrible. You know what? Actually, there's a place down here. Dates are different than figs, aren't they? Never mind. So there's a place here that will do a date wrapped in bacon, and they stuff it with cream cheese. And you can only have 2 because they're so rich. But if it were like that, I think a fig would probably be okay if it were like that.
All right, we'll work with it here. We'll work with it here a little bit.
Yeah, I'm trying to save myself here.
Yeah, so we got that's the top 5 list there. We got figs at 1, pineapple at 2, cantaloupe at 3, watermelon at 4. And, it's not the greatest one, but at least we got grapefruit at the back, which is the most important part of this whole thing. And I could have slid kiwi in there, and that would have been really bad to put them at number 1.
That would have been terrible for me. The thing is, I probably am like a texture freak, but blueberries, kiwi, if they're ripe, they're fine. But I've had too many squishy fruits in my life. But in California, you probably don't experience this. Like your fruit is all fresh. By the time it gets to us in Missouri, you get too much squishy fruit.
Yeah, we don't get too much. I mean, I love my fruit. I'm on this low cholesterol diet right now because I went to the doctor after my second hip replacement. And they're like, yeah, your cholesterol's high. I'm like, what? So now I'm on like, I love my red meat. I love my ice cream. I love my cheese. And these are all things I'm not allowed to eat. So now I'm eating figs. I'm eating nuts, cashews, almonds, all these other things that just taste horrible to me. But here we are. But you know what? That's not here nor there. Let's talk about maybe an analyst. I want two here. One analyst that you kind of groom your game after, and then another analyst that you feel is underrated right now.
Yeah, I mean, I very easy answer on who I groom my game after, and that's Mel Kiper Jr. You know, he is an idol of mine and has been since I was 7 years old. You know, and to have met him now and to have worked alongside him for a couple of years, I can't express enough how kind and genuine he is as a human being. Like he's just, you know, every time I see him, he asks about my wife and kids. And, you know, it's funny. We were in Detroit and my wife was like, I got to get a selfie with Mel Kiper. And I'm like, there's no way he's going to take a selfie with you. Like, come on. You know, we were just on TV for like 3 days straight. He's wiped out. And she's like 5 foot tall and she walks up. Mel's like 6'2". And she walks up and is like, hey, like, you know, can I like take a photo with you? And he's like, oh yeah, come on. Like, I can't, but like, who pulls that, you know, but like Mel's just the greatest person. And I think as an analyst, any of us who cover the draft would be lying if we said we didn't have some Mel to our game. You know, we all call our rankings big boards, you know, everybody like, or even now you see people doing like, oh, it's mock draft 1.0. Like who started that? Mel did, you know? And so they're, you know, like his mannerisms and cadence are his, no one can copy that. But, you know, I think every person who covers the draft looks at Mel as like the template for what we do in a lot of ways. So he's definitely the guy that I would say I model my game after. Someone who's underrated. That's tough. There's so many people. I want to try to pick someone that doesn't work at like a big outlet because I think it's kind of a cop out to some degree. I want to think about
Jordan Reed would have been a nice one there before he got on with ESPN.
Oh my God,
long behind, right?
When Jordan at Pro Football Focus, or not Pro Focus, excuse me, at Draft Network, amazing. How about Trevor Sikkema, who maybe he doesn't count because I don't feel like, and that's the hard part. Like I feel like Trevor is as good as anyone who does this job, but I don't know that he's, you know, not that I'm a household name either, but I don't know that he's, you know, a name that a lot of people know yet. That's going to change because he's amazing at his job, you know, and you know, he's been featured on, I've seen him do TV, you know, he has a great podcast with my old coworker, Connor Rogers. Like Trevor is fantastic. So, you know, I think something in this job, like sometimes you get asked like, hey, if you could hire anyone to like join our team, who would it be? And, you know, I work alongside 3 amazing guys covering the draft and Field Yates, Jordan Reed, Mel Kiper. You know, if we could add someone, Trevor would be on my short list of people. I think so highly of the work that he does.
And he's got that great head of hair too. Like he's got that great.
I'm so jealous of that.
Nose and stuff. Oh yeah. I mean,
so
my
jealous.
hair, I didn't really lose my hair, just kind of migrated elsewhere. But with that flow, man, it's that flow. You can't go wrong with that. I mean,
I'm very jealous.
So we know that maybe something makes you jealous like it does with me, but what has your journey maybe taught you about yourself?
Yeah, I think honestly, just that like I'm capable of working harder than I thought. You know, growing up in a small town, like school was kind of easy for me, and you know, when you got 30 people in your class, you're not exactly, you know, doing the hardest work in a rural school in Missouri, excuse me, but I think just that, like what you're capable of if you really push yourself, you know, like, and that carries over to a lot of different things now for me, you know, like whether it be parenting or, you know, trying to be, you know, like working on my health and my fitness. That was something that over the last year I started to take much more seriously. And it was like, okay, well, I just need to apply myself like I did to my career to these other things, you know, and so to be able to do that, it certainly shows you what you're capable of. And without an ego, it's not like that you're this super gifted special person. It's just like, hey, if you work your ass off and apply that same level of dedication, there's really not anything that you can't achieve.
Absolutely. I mean, people don't quite. This is why the show is called Behind the Grind. It is a grind to get to where you're going to go. And fitness is a big thing. We don't take time for ourselves very often to get to where we want to get to because you feel. You mentioned the draft, how it's covered by everybody nowadays. You feel like maybe you can't take time off because someone else is coming for that position that you're currently in. So that's always going to be in the back of your mind. Now, one thing that we always keep in the back of our mind is those who helped us get to where we are. Relationships, they're important. So let's kind of talk about maybe a couple of people that have kind of helped you become the man that you are today, whether that's through the Bleacher Report, your mother and father, kind of who are some other people, those unsung heroes in Matt Miller's life?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, mom and pop. I have 3 brothers, 2 older, 1 younger, that have been there, every step of the way. My younger brother actually worked with and for me for several years. He was at Bleacher Report, and then when I left Bleacher Report, he stayed with me to help launch the Draft Scout when we were both doing that together, which he still does it now. So certainly important. My wife and kids are, irreplaceable as far as the patience that they have and the things that I say, yeah, hey, we're going to do this. And then we don't get to because my schedule invariably changes and we have to push things to the next day or the next week. So they're big, as far as that goes. But, going back to the start, I think I mentioned, David Pitts, someone I coached with. When I was a sophomore in high school, my journalism teacher, our English teacher, Michael Brown, told me, it's like, you should consider journalism. You should consider writing about sports. You love sports. You're a good writer. You should put those 2 things together. And I would not be where I am today if he hadn't said that to me when I was 15 years old, to say, you love sports, you love writing, and you have kind of a natural talent at it. Why aren't you writing about sports instead of writing about this shit that I make you write about? And it was like a light bulb went off. It was like, oh yeah, I could do that, and so he's someone that every chance I get, I thank him for that, for kind of lighting that fire under me. I mentioned 2 guys at Bleacher Report. You and I would not be talking right now if it weren't for David Finocchio and Dylan McNamara, because not only did they, bring me on to Bleacher Report, they saw something in me and they pushed me. They gave me that motivation of, hey man, like, we see something in you and this company is about to take off. And if you, will dedicate yourself and work your ass off, you're going to take off with it. And they had that vision for me. I think even before I knew what it could be, they were those guys who were like, dude, like, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. They were I was the first person at Bleacher Report to do anything on camera. And I was by far the least qualified, but they were like, no, you're going to be our guinea pig on camera. You're going to be our, I was just the guy that they threw things at. And if they hadn't done that, I don't think, so many people, unfortunately, in this business, it's hard to maintain it for any amount of time. So to look back now and have, almost 14 years of doing it, like, as my full-time job, wouldn't be the case if those 2 guys hadn't believed in me the way they did.
It really is amazing how others can see the best in us long before we can see it. I mean, and so hat tip to everybody that can do that kind of stuff, because it's not easy. And we're probably our worst critics when it comes down to where we maybe have that imposter syndrome kind of creep in from time to time. How about kind of a 2-part question here? One last piece of advice for anybody trying to make it into sports media in general.
Yeah, I talk to journalism classes, whether it be high school, college, things like that. And the thing I always say to people is, and this is somewhat of a riff on what I did, right? There's no reason not to do it. There's, if I were starting over in 2024, I can guarantee you I would be on YouTube, I would be on TikTok, I would be on Twitter, Threads, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit. It's free. Like, it costs absolutely nothing to create your content and put it out there. A podcast is a little bit different. There's a little small expense that comes with that, but like, no excuse to not be doing the work and building your audience, because that's the hardest part, right? Is building your audience. So I think in this day and age, there are so many avenues to do that. So what I tell people is, if you're passionate about it, start doing it. Even if you're just sending it to mom and dad at this point, having them read it, or sending it to your buddies and having them read it. Like, start finding your voice, start learning, what you like to write about, start, your even your style as a writer or as a podcast host or as an analyst. There's so many different kind of paths you can go down. Just start doing it and figure that out. You can figure that out before if you want to go to college for journalism or communications, whatever it might be. I think that's a fantastic thing to do, but you could walk into college with a platform already built and jump ahead of the line, so to speak.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've jumped ahead of the line is kids. I'm basically the Canadian version of Philip Rivers. I also know that you have a couple kids out there. And I think you were a young father yourself once upon a time. How
Yep.
about a piece of parenting advice maybe you wish you would have known then that you know now?
Yeah, so I was 17 when my daughter was born. Don't recommend that. I mean, we grew up together, which is great, and she's fantastic. She just graduated from University of Kansas with a master's degree in social work. She just starts her grown up job on Monday, actually, as a therapist working with little kids. So she's amazing. Advice I wish I had at 17 versus when my son was born, I was 30. Um, I think just patience, that you're going to make mistakes as a parent. They're going to make mistakes as a youngster. So just, don't sweat the small stuff. My parents tried to tell me when I was a young parent, like, pick your battles. Like what things are worth, fighting about, what things are worth getting upset about, what things are worth just like closing your eyes and taking a deep breath over. And I certainly had that figured out a lot better by the time my son was born than I did, which thank goodness. If I think people out there who have a son and a daughter understand it's much better to have the daughter first because they're so easy compared to boys. If I'd had my son at 17, I think I would have, it would be very, very different, right? It'd be, we would both have pulled all of our hair out by this time. So, so I think that's the thing, and patience is a struggle for me daily anyway. And so that's certainly a lesson I'm learning, every moment of every day.
All right, Matt, send us off here. What do you got coming down the pipe here in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, summer's pretty quiet around here, honestly. So it's nice because I get caught up. I'm doing a lot of team study, like how teams are built. I'm looking at a lot of prospects. But next week I'll have a top 5 list for you with my guy Jordan Reed, breaking down our top 5 at each position and doing a little debate back and forth on who those players are.
There you have it. This has been Behind the Grind with Matt Miller. And remember, if you're going to get into fantasy sports there, do it today. Do it right now. And it's a lot less disgusting than kissing the Blarney Stone in Ireland because who knows whose lips have been there. We'll see you next time. Take care.